Today is Sunday, December 17th, 2023, and this is Flashpoint.
Hi, welcome to Flashpoint. I'm glad you're with us. Ever since Governor Whitmer announced the formation of a council to look into how to grow our state's population, I've been eager to have the co-chairs of that council on this program. But John Rakolta and Shirley Stancato really didn't have any findings or recommendations to talk about yet, so they kept asking me to sit tight. Well, now they do have findings to share and some strategies to explore. It is massively important that Michigan gets this right. There isn't a great future ahead for a state that not only can't attract new residents, but can't hang on to the ones that it already has. And John Rakolta and Shirley Stancato are here this morning to take us through the report released on Friday. Also, this past week, the No Labels movement made a stop in Michigan, making their case before the Detroit Economic Club. We've talked quite a bit about the impact a third-party candidate might have on the 2024 election. But as is often noted, no matter what the electorate says about wanting another option, third-party candidates only tend to run someone else's party off the table rather than having a really shot at winning. But Pat McCrory is the former governor of North Carolina, a co-chair of No Labels, and he thinks this time it's different. He's here to talk about that, too. And can we believe what people tell pollsters anymore? All today on Flashpoint. Michigan is in the middle of an existential crisis. As the new report just released by the Growing Michigan Together Council puts it, we are losing too many of our talented young people and failing to attract others. And when they leave, our communities suffer from lost tax base and wages needed to support our public amenities, schools, roads, transit, and housing, and to attract businesses to our state. The cycle of healthy growth is broken. Puts it in pretty stark terms, and it has been the focus for my two guests since their appointment from Governor Whitmer to address the problem. The co-chairs of the Growing Michigan Together Council are here, Shirley Stancato and John Rakolta. Thanks so much for being here. As I said earlier in the program, I've been wanting you for some time. You didn't have anything yet to talk about, and now you do. This report last week. Let me start with you, Shirley. I think the biggest marching order here is trying to convince Michiganders that this is a crisis.
Exactly. And when we started this, we really didn't know what the situation, was all about. We didn't realize. But the more information we got, the more we said, oh, my God, we kept having aha moment after aha moment.
In the bad way.
In a bad way. So just specifically, the number of young people who've left the state, and it's made the state older. So the under 19-year-olds have grown about 20% in the last 40 years, same amount for the 20 to 34. The plus 65 age group has grown 98%.
Yeah.
And so what that says is jobs, who can do the jobs, companies moving here, healthcare, all of those implications. That's just one example of the issue, and more information came, more data came, and then we realized, we started saying, John and I said, this is really a crisis.
Really hard to build growth on
Yes.
top of that calculus. John, Michigan ranks 49th out of 50 states when it comes to population growth. It is stark.
It is, and if you look at the trend for the last 50 years, our percentage of the population of the total U.S. population has declined precipitously. We used to have 19 congressional seats. Today we have 13. Yep. And the projections would say that if we're not careful, we'll end up at 10. If we had just stayed average, 4% of the national population, if Michigan had its fair share, today we would have over 12.5 million people living in the state of Michigan. And you can imagine what 2.5 million people mean in terms of additional tax revenue, economic output. Yeah. All of that is at risk as we go forward.
And that the congressional number you talk about is more than just a metric. That means influence over the nation's affairs, which is often about self-interest, of course,
absolutely.
Right? For a lot of states.
Committee chairs and how much of the federal budget gets directed toward our state.
One of the things that was so interesting while you were doing your work, I kept seeing headlines and a lot of social media from people that said that mostly what you all were working on was ways to raise taxes. I was like, what are they reading that I'm not? Where's this coming from? But that tells you kind of where the resistance is already built in to us fixing this.
Exactly. On the council, we said that we did not have any conversation about taxes, about how to pay for this. Because, again, we were very, very specific about let's focus on what is the problem. And that then, what the problem is then would have a lot to do with whether and how you are paid for it, et cetera. But we didn't have any conversation about that at all. We looked at what's the problem, and it went deeper and deeper and deeper.
Yeah.
So John and I would say, you pick up the newspaper, and it would say, you're going to raise taxes. And we said, well, again, where were they? We did not have that conversation. And today, in the report that came out, you see, that was not there at all.
It's not, but there are, John, a number of steps in here, and some of them are clearly going to cost money. You think that Michiganders should have their first 2 years of access to college should be free. We have been working toward that. We've seen that certainly with community college outreach. We talk about mass transit, which we talked about on the program last week, how important that is to attracting and keeping young people. That's not going to be free. I mean, a lot of this is not, let's not call it revenue neutral, right?
Well, that's absolutely true. But we provide at the back of the report a prescription of how you can fund these new initiatives. The first step is to take a look at the $50 billion budget that the state currently has and ask yourself this fundamental question. Is it efficient? Is there waste? And are the programs within that $50 billion budget returning on their investment the way it was intended? So the first place we have to look is in the $50 billion budget we have, and that's going to be a hard task to undertake. That means that certain special interest groups are going to lose out. I think that everyone's loath to go down that path, but we recommended that. Two, we've said we've got to look at the federal budget and ask ourselves, are we getting our fair share of those dollars? Are we fulfilling all the requirements of every one of those grant programs? Three, philanthropy. Philanthropy contacted us during this 6 months and said, how can we help? And we said to them, we're going to come back to you, but philanthropy can play a very, very big role in perhaps funding some of this. And so can private enterprise. And then finally, we have to take a look at our own tax structure today. And is it an appropriate tax structure for the 21st century? Then and only then could you then begin to convince the citizens in the state of Michigan that perhaps we ought to look at a different way of raising revenue. It is the caboose on a long, long train driven by a different engine.
This is tricky because, Shirley, when we look at where we are likely losing people to, we look at the growth states in America these days. A lot of them are states that don't have an income tax. So somewhere there does have to be a discussion about how we're going to tax people.
Exactly, but part of the reason we didn't have the discussion is because we wanted to make sure, again, we focused on what is the problem. And once you put the problem down, it got deeper and deeper and deeper, then we said, we don't have enough time. I will tell you the other thing that's happened is that Hillary Doe, who's the chief growth officer, went around this state and talked to people from the Upper Peninsula to the Lower Peninsula, East and West, more than 10,000 folks she spoke with, young people, to get information that is a part of this report. So it wasn't just that the governor gave us 6 months. We didn't even seat the council for about 6 weeks by the time we got the work groups together. And so we focused totally on what the work was for probably about 3.5 months is about the amount of time we had. And so we said to ourselves, well, to each other, is it important that we do this right or that we do this fast? And so we said, let's make sure we do it right. And then, as John said, there are things that have to happen after this.
I think, let me just make one more point on this issue. And that is in 1979, we passed the Headley Amendment as a state.
Right.
That amendment fundamentally changed how and how much taxes could be raised in the state of Michigan. And over the ensuing 50 or 40 years, Michigan has gone from the 5th highest tax state in the union to the 39th highest tax state in the union. And I think that the public deserves a really robust, factual debate about are our revenues being spent properly and how far short are we in that revenue collection are we in terms of properly funding roads and education.
I was going to say education. We need the same conversation because when I got to Michigan 30 years ago, it was one of the leading states in the country when it came to education. I got here just about the time Proposal A was taking effect. I'll leave it up to somebody else to do the forensics on whether that led to our problems. But we need to have the same conversation because education is a big part of this conversation. I want to get to, though, the very first recommendation you make. If there's good news in this, John, the very first recommendation is that Michigan has to become the innovation hub of the Midwest. And it seems to me that that's the one that we have jump-started. What's going on in Corktown, what's going on with the Michigan Innovation Center in District Detroit, and what's going to happen with Henry Ford Hospital. We're getting some something right then.
We are, absolutely. And what we need to do is back to the education. We need to prepare the talent pipeline to be able to feed those innovation hubs with software engineers, entrepreneurs, other kind of biomedical engineers who can do the research and the commercialization of these new ideas that are come forth. So education is a huge fundamental piece of this. And while you didn't say it, I want to underscore, we have slipped from a top 10 state in terms of K through 12 to almost 40th.
Yep.
We are not providing the talent that needs to be for the 21st century.
And so companies are building their places elsewhere. They're moving elsewhere because we don't have the talent here in Michigan.
I highly recommend it. It's about 84 pages long. The website we will link on clickondetroit.com. Here it is at the bottom of the screen right now in the Growing Michigan Together Council report. Thank you both for the work on this.
Thank you for having us.
Devin. Appreciate it.
You bet. We come back. We've got a lot more to come. This is Flashpoint on Local 4. Don't go away.